Today we're going to look at distance, rate, and time. Our goal is to apply algebra to familiar formulas to calculate distance, rate, and time. In this lesson, you will learn how to write an equation that represents the relationship between the distance, rate, and time. So what is the relationship between distance, rate, and time? Well, in words, the distance traveled, represented as a variable d, is the product of the constant or average rate, represented by the variable r, and the time, represented by the variable t. In algebra, it means d equals the rate multiplied by the amount of time. So d equals rt, in other words. But of course, it's important to note that you're multiplying the rate and the time. In numbers, for example, if I traveled 45 miles per hour for 3 hours, I could find my distance by multiplying 45 miles per hour times 3 hours. The hours would cross-cancel, and I would be left with my distance, which is 135 miles. Some common mistakes is that students will rewrite the formula incorrectly. For example, 35 miles per hour is not the distance. For 35 miles per hour would be the rate. And if I were to say traveled 185 miles, that would not mean that it was the rate, that would be the distance. So sometimes students will plug it in incorrectly, so it's always really important to think about what each word represents and what numbers go with what variables. So how can I find the distance for the given rate and time? Well, we can use algebra to substitute numbers for the variable. Remember, d equals rt. So if I said she traveled 7 inches per minute for 9 minutes, I know that I have per. That's a good indication that I'm dealing with a rate. And in this case, I have 7 inches per minute, so that's my rate. And my time is 9 minutes, because that's my total time. So I can plug that into d equals r multiplied by the time. So then I'm just left with a simple multiplication problem to find my distance. So I keep my d the same, and then I can multiply 7 times 9 and get 63. So she traveled a total of 63 inches. That's my distance. Let's look at another example. He traveled 14 miles per second for 18 seconds. So again, miles per second would be 14 miles per second for 18 seconds. That would be my time. So when I plug it in, I would have d equals 14 times 18. And so then I can find my distance, which I know is going to be in miles. So my distance equals, I can use the distributive property to make this, of course, 20 minus 2 and multiply that by 14. 14 times 20 is 280. 14 times 2, of course, is 28. 280 minus 28 would give me 252 miles. So look at that. I even associated the distributive property to find the distance in miles. Let's keep going. A rabbit traveled 22 feet per second for 12 seconds. How many feet did it run? So I want to know how many feet did it run. So when I think about that, okay, do I know what that represents in d equals rt? Well, let's look at my other numbers. 22 feet per second would be my rate. For 12 seconds, that would be my amount of time. And then how many feet, my total distance, would be my distance. So I don't know my d, or distance, so I keep that the same variable. I do know what I can substitute for my r, 22, and I know what I can substitute for my 12, or for my time, which is 12. So again, I can use the distributive property. I can redistribute the 12, or I can redistribute the 22, which is what I would rather do, and make it 20 plus 2 times 12 to find my distance. So my distance is 12 times 20, which is 240, plus 12 doubled, which is 24. So the rabbit traveled a distance of 264 feet. And I really should put feet per second and cross cancel. So I have feet per second, and then my seconds would cross cancel. So then I'm left with just feet for my words. And that's actually an important step when you have to cross cancel multiple quantities. For example, if you have to convert hours to minutes and then minutes to seconds, there's multiple steps there, and that way you can cross cancel your words, not just your numbers. So numbers can cross cancel too. Let's look at this problem. A family traveled a distance of 220 miles at an average speed of 55 miles per hour. How long did it take to reach their destination? How long did it take? A common mistake is students will just multiply 22 times 55. But in this case, I want to know my time. So I plug in what I know. So I'm going to write, of course, 220 miles total would be my distance. 55 miles per hour would be my rate, because that per is another indication that it's probably rate. So then I just plug in what I know. I have d equals rt. I know my d is 220 equals my rate, which is 55 miles per hour, multiplied by the time, so I'm going to use a t for my variable. So in this case, I have to ask myself, 55 times what is 220? Well, in order to find that, I can divide by 55 in order to figure out, well, 55 times what is 220? 55 cross cancels, and I know that there are 4 groups of 55 in 220. So here we have 4. Well, 4 what? How long did it take to reach their destination? Well, I had miles cross cancel with miles, so that would be 4 hours. So my time is 4 hours. So that's using a little bit of algebra. Sometimes when we know the distance, we have to use substitution and then algebra to find either the missing rate or time. Of course, if we're just looking for the distance, it's easier. We always multiply. If we're looking for the rate or the time, we know we have a division problem on our hands. Now it's your turn to practice. So find the missing distance, rate, or time. You're going to notice that you have one of each. So the first problem, you need to find your distance. You have a rate of 58 miles per hour at 2.5 hours. The next one, we have our distance, and we need to find our rate at a time of 25 minutes. In the last problem, fill in the blank, we have a distance of 242 miles at a rate of 22 miles per hour. We want to know how many hours. And finally, your last word problem. At a charity walk, you walk 10 miles for 2 hours and 30 minutes. How fast did you walk? So in this problem, you have a little challenge. You need to figure out how you can convert 2 hours and 30 minutes into something that you can work with very easily. Go ahead and take a minute to pause the tutorial and finish your guided practice problems now. So another really great job today. Make sure you're keeping the formula D equals RT in your mind. You're going to see it often. In this lesson, you have learned how to write an equation that expresses the relationship between the distance, rate, and time. Good job on your math today. You're hitting a slam dunk in the right direction.